Life long before conflicts evolved between the United States government and the Navajos was filled with joy and the free will to express traditional teachings and cultures. Navajos express themselves fearlessly through their sacred language every day. From saying a prayer in the morning, to singing with grandma in the afternoon, to communicating with mom throughout the day. Navajos live peacefully between Mother Earth and Father Sky. The Navajo language is used to communicate not only with others around them, but to the holy ones above. It is said that one word in Navajo means more to our holy ones than one word in English. The Navajo language means everything to the Navajo people. But then, all of that was about to be taken from the Navajo people. Around the 1870s, the United States forced Navajo families to send their young children to boarding schools. If families were refused, they were punished, and their children would be taken either way. Sometimes when families were separated, their parents were killed. This occurred mostly when parents refused to give up their child. When children were taken to these boarding schools, it was for one purpose only. It was to brainwash and attempt to get rid of any evidence of an indigenous child. It was to kill the Indian, save the man. When children first got to the boarding schools, the first thing the administration did was change their appearance. They cut the long hair of the children. Hair in the Navajo tradition represents life. It is said that the longer your hair, the longer you'll live and the stronger you'll be. They were stripped from everything that connected them to their language and culture. At the boarding schools, they were put into uniforms and were treated as prisoners in their own country. Life in boarding schools was harsh. Children there were told to never speak their Navajo language. They could only speak English. If they were caught speaking Navajo, disciplinary actions came into play. Children were whipped with rulers, their mouths were washed with soap, or they spent the day alone without eating. These boarding schools could easily be compared to the Holocaust camps. But then, in 1941, December 7th, the Pearl Harbor in Honolulu, Hawaii was bombed by the Japanese. This caused a tragic yet well-needed turn in our American history. This not only caused the people within the United States to come together, but it caused all the citizens to put their differences aside to protect their beloved country. The conflicts between the people within the United States were forced to be resolved and barriers were broken. This included the Navajos within the Four Corners area, Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico. The language of the Navajos was used as a weapon for freedom. Immediately after this event occurred, the United States declared war and sided with the Allies. The war was nothing but success until communications between squads became a problem. The codes used to communicate were being broken left and right. This made it terribly difficult to arrange squads to help American soldiers survive. The United States scrambled for solutions until out-of-the-ordinary decision was brought upon by Philip Johnson, a civil engineer who at the time lived in Los Angeles, California. Johnson then met up with Lieutenant Colonel James E. Jones and pitched the idea that they should use the Navajo language to communicate during the war. Johnson knew the Navajo language because his parents were missionaries and he grew up on the Navajo reservation. In the beginning stages of the development of this idea, everyone was skeptical, even though beforehand other languages were used as codes before. Johnson was asked to complete a trial at Camp Elliott, located in San Diego, California. On February 28, 1942, 4 Navajo speakers demonstrated how the code would be transferred. They sent and translated 6 coded messages perfectly. Then, Lieutenant Colonel James E. Jones decided to accept the idea and gave it a chance. Immediately after the idea was accepted, Marine recruiting personnel appeared on the Navajo Nation. They proceeded to enlist 29 volunteers from boarding schools all over the Navajo Nation, with the exception of certain guidelines. Although the mission for these schools was to take the Navajo traditional ways out of the young Navajos, the Marine recruiting personnel went there looking for Navajo children who could speak fluently both Navajo and English. Some Navajos thought this was quite ironic. The United States was asking for their help and wanted their permission to use their language because their language could possibly save the country. Even the students of these boarding schools saw it in this perspective. These native soldiers enlisted to fight for precisely the nation that had dispossessed and colonized them far into the 20th century. The native soldiers also saw this as an opportunity to protect their land and Mother Earth. They saw it as a way to express that Navajos were just as intelligent and possibly even stronger than the average Bilagana man. After the recruiting process, the Navajos were sent to boot camp. There they made sure that the young Navajo men were physically fit enough to serve as a messenger during the war. After basic training, the soon-to-be Navajo code talkers were transferred to Camp Pendleton in Oceanside, California. There they were told to design a new Marine Corps military code to be used in World War II. The code consisted of 211-word English vocabulary and the Navajo equivalents. The code was a two-way code, meaning that if someone were to try and break it, they would have to figure out two codes instead of one. For example, Nimasi in Navajo is potato, but in the military sense, it means hand grenade. Soon as the Navajo code talkers created the base of the code, more recruitments were enlisted. They were also taught the code and sent out into combat as messengers. The Navajo code talkers participated in every major Marine operation in the Pacific Theater, giving the Marines a critical advantage throughout the war. In the near-month-long Battle of Iwo Jima, 6 Navajo code talkers managed to successfully transmit more than 800 messages without errors. The Marine leaders at the time noted that the Navajo code talkers were critical to the victory at Iwo Jima. The code of the Navajo code talkers was a key weapon in warfare. Because of that, the United States decided to keep it confidential until everything about the war had died down. Post-war was a tough time for the Navajo code talkers. Many of them suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder. One of the factors that played into PTSD was the fact that they could not talk about what happened during the war. Neither could they share the remarkable code that they designed and translated themselves. It was not until 1982 when the President of the United States, Ronald Reagan, recognized the last of the code talkers. This was where the original 29 Navajo code talkers received the Congressional Gold Medal for their service to the United States of America. At this time, this was still a controversial topic. Some people thought the Navajo code talkers needed to receive the recognition they deserved, while others didn't think the Navajo code talkers needed it. Racism played a big role in the life of an indigenous Marine. Even though they fought for the same country, people still thought less of them and put them down to shame. Now, in present life, across the country there are landmarks and memorials that honor the Navajo code talkers. There are even movies made about them that glorify Navajo code talkers and bring awareness to the reality side of World War II. They show the success of the code, the racism, and other obstacles the Navajo code talkers had to face head-on. The code talkers broke the language barrier that the United States government tried to put up. Now, to this day, the Navajo Nation takes great pride in their Navajo code talkers because they showed their true potential and proved that they have more than what it takes to be considered a citizen of the United States of America. Even with all the barriers they face, from boarding school to actual combat, they came home safely and were a major part in winning World War II for the Allies. They showed that the Navajo language was a beautiful sacred language that wasn't useless. It was a language that saved their country.
There was very secret, and we can talk about what we went through to our family. Everything was strictly secret.
Currently, in modern day of the Navajo Nation, they celebrate Navajo Code Talkers Day, and it is considered a holiday. There are also sacred traditional songs dedicated to the Code Talkers because of the heroism they projected. Even in classrooms across the Navajo Nation, the Navajo Code Talkers are taught to younger children as young as 8 years of age. The Navajo Code Talkers have made a big impact on everyone and gave hope to younger Navajos. They gave the younger generation great fearless role models and encouraged them to keep pushing forward no matter what barriers they face.